Please join me in welcoming Sam Nicholls, Director of Public Cloud at Veeam. Sam, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. And thanks for everyone tuning in for the podcast. Really excited to be here, talk to you all today.
Yeah, Sam. So you and I have talked a lot. This is actually the first time I've had you on video. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
You're an awesome guy to chat with. I love your accent. Or do I have the accent? I'm not sure which one it is.
Mine's it's to use a word that I can't use on radio, right? So I have to use my radio voice, but my accent kind of falls somewhere between US and England now. It's a mix. I can't understand it myself. So yeah.
Nice. All right, before we get to what Veeam is, how about a little bit of information on who Sam is and where Sam come from and his expertise on Veeam and not only backup and DR?
Yeah, absolutely. So who Sam is, where I'm from, where I'm at now. So I actually grew up just outside of London, moved to the US almost 10 years ago now. And that's kind of like really where I started digging harder and harder into the tech space. Worked for some storage companies like on-prem object storage, replicated across a couple of nodes, like big security compliance, write once, read many stuff, which we'll probably talk about in relation to the cloud in a bit. And then that's really when I kind of jumped over to Veeam 6.5 years ago now, when Veeam was really just like a backup and recovery company for vSphere VMs, Hyper-V VMs on premises. And over these 6.5 years, worked on pretty much every product within our portfolio because it is, and we do much more than just VM backup, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit.
Oh, we're going to talk about all the capabilities of Veeam, and not only is its hybrid or multi-cloud methods, but there's also some additional things that Veeam does that I'm not sure everybody's aware of. Let's get into what is Veeam.
Yeah, Veeam. I mean, like I said, we started as a backup and recovery company, like purpose-built agentless backup for VMware. That's what we set out to do. We kind of went out, conquered that market, #1 market share. Everyone raves about it. And at that point, I think we went a little bit opposite to what most backup companies did, right? They started on physical, then they went into virtual. We had such a high demand to deliver backup for physical machines. That's what we delivered. And some of the first products that I worked on and fully owned, like our agents for Windows and Linux. But of course, the market has been shifting significantly towards the cloud. Particularly over the last few years, accelerated by that thing that I don't think anyone wants me to say that word, but it's a heavy shift towards the cloud. And of course, Veeam has had to keep abreast of that to stay relevant. But ultimately, it's backup, recovery, application mobility, monitoring, analytics for not just virtual machines on premises, not just physical machines on premises, but a number of cloud-hosted workloads as well. So your EC2 instances, RDS, EFS, ECS, EKS. I'm not going to go and list all the acronyms, but you get the picture.
There are so many acronyms that you can list. I know your latest one, and we're going to jump ahead. I know we're going to jump around a little bit, was EFS, right? That was the latest release that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so we actually just launched our latest version of Veeam Backup from AWS version 5 just a month ago. EFS coverage was actually included in the prior version. We really just amped that up this time round. We do the file level indexing. So idea behind it is you have that simple e-discovery, very easy to find individual files, folders, restore those in place, or at a new location, just make the recovery experience a whole lot faster, because after all, that's what we buy backup for in the end, right?
I want to dive into EFS in just a little bit because we went through it and I love the ease in use. And I want to talk about some of the costs associated with it and how you guys are aware of not to really, put somebody out of their pockets with having a device or an instance running for their costs to browse and pull those backups. Let's get into, you mentioned agentless. I think that's a seller right there. You're talking about not having an agent installed, but let's differentiate. Is it agentless on-prem or just cloud? And how does that work?
So certainly for the virtual machines on premises, agentless, and we really brought that approach to the cloud as well. Now, can you protect a workload in the cloud with an agent? Some of the times, right? If you're talking about your EC2, your virtual machines, you can absolutely install an agent on each and every single one of those machines if you want. And I think
good luck with that because
yeah,
the time consuming of doing that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, you start to impact the throughput of the machine and degradation of performance. I still think there is a time and a place for agents sometimes, but the best way to go is agentless, right? Take a native approach to that platform, right? What integrations can we leverage? What APIs can we utilize that AWS exposed to us to provide a purpose-built backup and recovery solution that can build on all of the reasons why you've gone to the cloud, right? So you mentioned cost, but security benefits as well. What can we do with snapshots to provide, the lowest RPOs and RTOs, right? How much data are you willing to lose? How quick do you want to recover? But really building it for that environment, and agentless is absolutely the way to go for the cloud. And if you look at stuff like RDS and EFS and other PaaS workloads in other cloud platforms, there's nowhere to install an agent anyway. So you have to go with an agentless approach, a native approach, a purpose-built one.
All right, so walk me through the install process. How quickly can I get up and running? I mean, where do I go to just say install is set up and to make sure that I feel secure, backed up, and reliable?
So install process is very, very easy. It's a typical Army deployed through the AWS marketplace. We have 3 different editions, which we can go into in a little bit, but one of them absolutely is free. But you literally just go out, carve out the size of the EC2 instance that you want to use. We do have some best practices around what sizes that you might want to consider depending on your environment to get that optimal performance. But within a few minutes, a few clicks of a button, you can have the appliance deployed, and then there's 3 steps to getting it configured, wizard-driven approach, boom, 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 done. And then
what are those 3 steps that you have to go through to get this set up and really configured so that you can get your backups in place?
Sure. So there's a couple of terms that I'm going to use that might need a little bit of explanation. First off, you've got to go out and configure a repository, right? So this is your Amazon S3 bucket or buckets, whether that's S3, Glacier, Glacier Deep Archive, where you're going to store these image-based backups of your EC2 instances. That's the first thing that you've got to configure. Second thing would be around roles. So just making sure that the right permissions are there to perform a number of these operations. Primarily that communication across different accounts. We do advocate for cross-account backup and recovery. Logical separation is always desirable on premises, same in the cloud. How does AWS deem security boundaries in the cloud? Accounts. So those IAM roles are there to facilitate the backup and recovery process across accounts. And then the final thing is workers. These are essentially ephemeral data movers that will be automatically instantiated when an action needs to be performed. Maybe create an image-based backup, maybe do a file level recovery, maybe do the file level indexing for EFS, and then automatically terminated once they've done their job. Because again, we want to keep costs down. You don't want to be paying for compute when you don't need it. But those are really the 3 things that you have to configure within the environment and are relatively easy and straightforward if you have any modicum of knowledge about AWS. And you can be up and running in minutes.
All right, so I configured my policy and I've already initiated a backup, right? And I'm assuming there's a retention period available to me. And say my retention period is, 30 days and I'm going to S3. Have you built in some capabilities for S3 to go to something that's a bit cheaper, maybe like, just a single zone or, go into Glacier, or do you have to build that into S3 to do that? Are there additional steps to take aware of not only the retention, but the cost?
Yeah, so that's a multi-pronged question. I think the first thing to say is our primary line of defense when it comes to backup and recovery is creating that native snapshot, right? Whether, EBS snapshot for your EC2 volumes. And we would advocate keeping for that as an EC2 snapshot for any period of time that you define. Because again, the recoveries from EBS are much, much faster. But it's much, much more expensive to retain an EBS snapshot for any period of time than it is that snapshot as a backup on S3 or any flavor of, right? I think EBS volumes are 5 cents per gig per month. S3 is less than half that. And you get down to like S3 Glacier, you're talking fractions of a cent per gig per month. So you can create these policies to retain that data across different tiers. So as the data ages, and the likelihood of needing to recover fast from it happens, it gets moved across, more cost-effective, less performant object storage, Amazon S3, so you can meet retention goals, whether those are 30 days, 7 years, whatever, but still keep the costs optimized and as small as possible. And we do include a calculator within the policy as well. So as you are creating this policy, we reference AWS list prices and the metrics that you are putting in the policy to give you a forecast as to how much that is going to cost you. So you don't get the bill shock, like I'm spending how much on backup, right? We give you that proactive foresight. And you're like, maybe I want to push that off to S3 faster, or S3 Glacier faster, or maybe I don't need to take a snapshot as frequently as I am. Really just aligning budgets with service level objectives, right?
Correct. Now, what are Veeam's capabilities for a single AWS account or an organization? Do I have to install into each one, or can I do it on an organizational level and back up across my accounts? Or what is best practices or recommendations?
So we kind of touched on that earlier. We would always advocate for having a dedicated account for backup and recovery. This is where the Veeam appliance would live. It's likely where your backup repositories, the S3, S3 Glacier, so on and so forth, will live as well. Again, you look at AWS well-architected framework, they certainly advocate for that. Cross-account is the way to go. Can you back up, multiple accounts into that single account? Absolutely can. We see some people that are, I don't use the word paranoid, it seems very negative, but we see some folks that will have the Veeam appliance in one account, the backup repository in another account, and then all of the other accounts that have their production workloads kind of funneling into that. But at minimum 2, your production account and your backup account.
All right. So Sam, can you walk me through what is an immutable backups? So what are they?
Yeah, great question as well. And this is really where I started to cut my teeth, like doing white label, immutable archival object storage boxes to healthcare companies. But it's just the same as in the cloud, right? Immutability kind of does what it says on the tin. It's that write once, read many functionality. So when you commit that backup in AWS to Amazon S3, we utilize Amazon S3 object lock to lock that data for a specified period of time. You can do that in the Veeam interface, very similarly to how you can just do it in the AWS console. But if I've got to keep these backups for 3 years, once that backup has been written, like I don't want it to be able to be deleted. I don't want it to be able to be changed. And that's really critical in the age of, into industry buzzword, ransomware, where folks are not just attacking the production environments, but they're really starting to go after the backup environments as well, because they've garnered onto the idea that, okay, I'm not getting paid my ransom because people are just recovering from a clean backup, so I'm going to go and infect the backup data as well. If we can make that backup data immutable, there's no chance of it being infected, so we can assure that clean recovery for that organization.
Can you walk me through what a restore process looks like for, say, an EC2 instance? And then we're going to talk about the EFS because I really like that. And we walked through that a little bit on the side. But what does a recovery process looks like? And what is a typical length of recovery? And I'm sure it depends upon the size of the snapshot itself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was going to say, how long's a piece of string, right? It all depends on the side of the machine. You have a multiple of options when it comes to actually recovering, in this case, an EC2 instance. You can do the EC2 instance itself, you can do the attached volume, or you can do a file level recovery. You, of course, get to choose the point in time where you'd like to recover from. So whether it was yesterday, 3 weeks ago, whatever it might be. And you can choose to do that in place of the existing instance or as a new instance as well. But the process, again, is very straightforward and simple. Everything's wizard-based through a web UI. So you would literally click, do I want to do a full or a file level recovery? Click, where do I want to recover from? Where do I want to recover to? Next, and just it will go off and do its thing. And this is where we'd start to use those workers we were talking about earlier, especially on the file level recovery piece. So we will then essentially open up a new browser window that has all of your folders, and you can click through just like you would on Finder on Mac. I don't even know what it's called on Windows anymore. It's been
Something like Explorer or something.
yeah, that would be it. Fortunately, I've always been a Mac guy. I was brought up on Mac, and I don't see that ever changing. But yes, it's
Yeah,
very,
I'm right
very.
there with you. We won't talk about the difference. This is not the show before Windows versus Mac, but I'm a Mac user the same, but I grew up with Windows to start. But I've got you, man.
Yeah, it used to live as a VM on Parallels. I don't even know if the license is
I
valid
had that.
anymore.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But I remember that was definitely a hog, but that's how you got it up and running to use certain
Yeah.
software on it.
Or boot
Okay, we
camp.
got off.
Boot camp.
Yeah,
Yeah, we got off track.
that's all right.
File level recovery. Yeah, essentially you can, search in a search bar for a specific file name, or you can just explore through it, find it, click on that file. Do you want to download it locally to the machine that you're accessing the web UI from now? Or do you want to use Amazon Kinesis to actually push that back into its original location? And at this point, and to somewhat answer your question of how long is it going to take, you can define the size of the EC2 instance that is going to run that worker. So you can go with a more powerful EC2 instance that is going to get you a quicker recovery time at more expense, or you can go with a less powerful EC2 instance that's going to take a longer time, but at less expense. So it's really just about giving you options. But a file level recovery can literally take, sub 1 minute.
Okay, wait a second. I didn't know you can decide the size of the worker to recover your data. That is
Yes.
huge, because now I'm thinking about, is this a production data that I need ASAP? So give me the biggest, best, I need to recover this now. Or is this just data that I'd like to have here, use this guy and I'll come back and get it?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just all about balancing that cost with performance. We don't want to be prescriptive one way or the other. You guys are the user, you know your environment, you know the organization's needs, right? If it's the CEO asking for a specific file, like, I'm not going to use like an expensive instance to get it to him as quick as possible. But if it's, I don't know, Harry down the hall that put vinegar in my coffee one day, we're gonna ensure that thing is.
I got the small one.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets the smallest instance, the longest recovery
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and
I'll see you in a
his
week.
manager can badger him.
Sam, what happens if I spin up this instance, right? So I'm spinning up the instance to get my file level. And this is not only the EC2, the EBS, the EFS, and we're kind of touching on that the same. And I spin it up and it's taken like a minute or two. And I'm a technical person. A minute or two, I'm going to go off and do something else. I got things to do. Well, one thing happens to another, and I forget to go back to that. Did I just cause my company a lot of money because I left that up and running and I forgot to pull the data and now I need to get it?
No. So once the worker has completed its task, so if you actually, stick around for a couple of minutes or a minute or 30 seconds and perform the recovery task, it will just automatically shut it down for you. You don't have to go in and turn that off. If you walk away, get distracted, squirrel, after 30 minutes of inactivity, we will just automatically shut it down as well. Yeah.
Nice.
So
I love that feature. I think that helps not only talk about the cost of it, but think about the security aspect, is that this machine is running with you're recovered of your data and it's just sitting there. And now you're taking both into consideration for the customer. So,
yeah.
So Sam, let's talk a little bit about using the S3, not only the variations of it and the data for it, but what are some of the other capabilities? Are you using S3 for anything else? Is it just where the backups live?
Yeah, essentially it's where the backups will live. We can also protect VPC configurations as well. Primarily, we would store those in our database within the appliance itself, but you could also copy that off to S3. But S3 is really where the backup is going to live. There are some cool things that we can do as you start to move into, let's call it the hybrid world. For anyone that knows Veeam, we patented this technology called instant VM recovery, where we'll spin up a virtual machine on premises and we'll stream the data out of the backup file. You can do that here as well. So let's say you have an EC2 instance that you've backed up to Amazon S3, and for whatever reason, like you cannot recover it in AWS. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, you can't. You could spin up a VM on premises, and without even having to move the data from S3 to on premises, you can stream that data out of that backup file in that S3 bucket to that VM on-prem and be up and running right away.
Okay, now I want to go try that out. That sounds pretty freaking cool. Like, okay, for whatever reason you can't spin it up, and there are some that you never know what's going to happen. You can't access that AZ, that zone, but you can pull it on because S3 has 11 nines of durability, so you can put it in. Wow, excuse me, I'll be right back. No, so let's talk about the VPC configuration and backup. I don't think there's anybody out there that actually pulls this. And thinking of how important a VPC configuration data, have you ever tried to actually replicate some of it and you're trying to write it down and this goes here? I did not know that you guys pull the configuration data. How do you back that up and how do you restore that? Or what does that look like to recover a VPC?
Super easy. So again, you would, from a policy perspective, policies are what drive the backup operations, right? You would just create a policy for VPCs. I want to protect it every so often, right? I want to store it in just the appliance itself, or I also want to store it in S3 too. And then when it comes to a recovery process, you can either recover those configurations into that VPC. You can create a new VPC, or you can even just browse through and it will show you what your VPC config is right now and what it was at that point in time of the backup that you're accessing, and show you like, these are the same, these are the same, these are the same. This is the one that's different.
Diff on it.
Yeah, so it's like this one that's different. So you could then just go back into the AWS console and just make that change as well. But if everything comes crashing down because of some VPC or networking config error, you can easily look at it and compare and contrast when it was working to when it wasn't.
Sam, that is freaking cool. When I saw that you guys did that and you just mentioned it, I completely forgot about it. I'm running the free trial. I have my 10 instances and things that I'm using for the VPC of backing it up. That's huge. I mean, you want to pick your production environment. You want to back up the VPC configuration within it. You have just saved your company a lot of time and money for maybe someone that went in there and changed a route or changed the configuration, or there's no internet gateway anymore. And that's the route that was going. I think you guys have really thought of a lot of things along the way for backup recovery. DR, huge. Sam, we talked about this in the beginning on some of the capabilities and offerings of Veeam, and we touched just a little bit on monitoring. What are your monitoring capabilities?
Yeah, so we primarily do this through a product called Veeam One. It pairs well with our kind of flagship on-premises solution, and you can link it into your AWS environment as well. Really, just looking at the backup health of, how's that? Excuse me, how's the appliance operating? Am I backup successful? What kind of capacity in terms of storage? If you want to do capacity planning, it's very handy. But that's also in the Veeam backup for AWS appliance itself. You can see how many instances are in the accounts that you've exposed to it, how many of them are protected, where has there been successes, where have there been errors, where have there been failures. We've even got like a bottlenecks piece in that web UI as well, where you can optimize the performance of your backup environment as well. So like I said in the beginning, if you're, running, or if you're protecting environments with, thousands and thousands of machines, you're going to want to consider running it on a larger EC2 instance. If you've got a relatively small environment, you're going to want to go with a, was it T2 micro, whatever it might be, because that might be sufficient for it. But there is that backup optimization piece as well, just to make sure that you're getting that best performance. You're meeting your backup windows. You're not spending too much money in terms of backup and recovery. And just back to that VPC piece, it's free. We don't charge for that. No matter how many VPCs that you want to back up, however many times you want to recover, it's free. So
nice. I like the capability. Part of the monitoring Well, let's talk about the alerting that you're able to do. What are the capabilities, and are there any methodology behind it that I could do a retry when a backup fails, or how often will a retry, or what are the type of alerting that can I get from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're going through and defining these policies, I believe it's the second to last step before the summary. There is that piece where you'll say, okay, if you get an error or a failure, automatically retry it this amount of times, but don't exceed more than this amount of times. And if it does fail, or if there is an error, please email such and such and such to let them know that there has been a failure on this specific policy. And then we do also expose all of everything through RESTful API as well.
I was just about to ask for the
I
API,
know you
so I
were.
can integrate it into Slack and configure something to automatically retry. You're reading my mind, Sam.
It's like we had this conversation before, man.
No, we really did.
That's your grand idea. I'm just trying to take credit for it.
Yeah, no, don't give me that. I'm just a guy here bringing out the story and the compellingness of utilizing Veeam. Sam, we talked about cost. We talked about security. We talked about like the ease of use and management and the installation of it. What about hybrid, or I don't want to say the bad word multi-cloud, because it does exist. Is Veeam just for AWS? Now we talked on-premise a little bit, but is it just for a little bit of both, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, we can pretty much protect every workload under the sun. Maybe overreaching a little bit there, but certainly your on-premises workloads. So VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix AHV, Red Hat virtualization, your Windows boxes, your Linux boxes, AIX, Unix, unstructured data like NAS and shares. Of course, AWS that we've discussed right now. That also includes Outposts and VMware Cloud on AWS. We do the same for Azure. So Azure VMs, Azure SQL, Azure Files, Google Cloud. We do Compute Engine VMs. We do Cloud SQL for MySQL. There's Microsoft 365 and everything that comes with that, right? So Exchange, OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint. We'll be introducing Salesforce very soon. And then we have our Kasten product. This is an acquisition that we made almost 2 years ago now. But this is any containerized workload that is managed by Kubernetes. We're able to, again, do backup, restore, disaster recovery, application mobility for. So ECS, EKS, whatever might live on premises. We're a launch partner for BottleRocket, the Azure flavors, the Google Kubernetes engine flavors. I mean, the list, I could probably keep going.
I was like, we don't have enough time to list all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
And the great thing is the vast majority of that, like we take this really modular architecture to our platform, right? So I mentioned Veeam Backup and Replication. It's the flagship. That's the thing that's going to let you protect on premises. If you do live in a hybrid or multi-cloud world, we have these add-ons that allow you to integrate the AWS component we were just talking about, the Azure, the Google equivalent, into that. So now you have just one throat to throat. You have a common control plane, common policy model for on-prem and public cloud, all through one interface. So you don't have to go out and manage, a ton of multiple different point products from a ton of different vendors, which is just a nightmare. It's expensive, it's complex. It's all under one vendor. And we just have a single, we call it the Veeam Universal License, that doesn't just lock you into a specific product within our platform. So say hi to my nanny, as your organization strategy changes, like, hey, we want to now migrate and modernize these workloads that are on-prem right now, and we want to put them in AWS. Those licenses that were protecting them as VMs on-prem don't become defunct, and then you have to call us up and spend more money. You don't even have to issue a license. In fact, you don't have to do anything with the license whatsoever. You just point the product to protect the workloads in AWS, and it'll automatically reassign the licenses for you. So I like to think of us as the most non-prescriptive vendor, right? Whatever your strategy is, like born in the cloud, 100% sole source on AWS, hybrid cloud to one degree today, another degree tomorrow, multi-cloud. Like we can fit into all of these different use cases and just make life a lot easier for you. Because who wants to babysit backup 9 to 5?
That used to be a role, but not anymore. Nobody wants to do that. That's something you move on. Now you have it as a single console for everything. Actually, I was going to ask you that question when we were talking about having it on-prem everything, but not only the ease of use, the ease of management, but I think you uncomplicated licensing.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke about licensing with Parallels earlier. I don't have the time to manage licenses or backups, so we'll just make it as again as simple and easy and flexible as possible. And we're not going to prescribe you to stay in one platform or another. Like that's up to your organization to decide. Like what is best for your organization. Veeam just wants to offer you, purpose-built backup that is native to the platform that you want to protect. That is, operationally consistent, so it's easy to use, easy to manage, and again, help you focus on other things like driving the business forward. I mean, we still see people within central IT whose 9 to 5 is backup and recovery, kind of the same like we saw with VMs whenever it was 15 years ago, right? VMs were these crazy things, and the backup admin wouldn't touch them. It was up to the VM admin. But over time, as they've become commonplace, the VM admin just focused on the VM, and the backup admin was protecting VMs. We're seeing the same with the cloud, right? About 60 in a hybrid organization, about 65% of the time, central IT has adopted responsibility to protect public cloud workloads as well. The other 35% of the time, we're looking at the cloud services team, admins, architects, engineers, whose, backup and recovery is like 5th, 6th on their list at best. They've got other priorities that they got to focus on. So with Veeam, go in, create your policies, do it based on tags. So anything that you instantiate automatically gets pulled into a policy. And ideally, you don't have to touch the product again until you come across a recovery scenario.
But you said tagging is important. I think I've been always talking about tagging, but you guys are actually utilizing tagging for, okay. Well, that'll be one of those cost optimization conversations where we talk about tagging and how it helps you throughout it. So Veeam's taking this to the next step. Before we talk about like new features and releases, actually, you know what? Let's get to that because you mentioned Salesforce. How did you pick Salesforce to back up?
I think it's just another one of those things, right? Especially in the SaaS world where people think, all right, everything is handled by that provider and I don't need to worry about anything. And all of them have a shared responsibility model. AWS has one, Microsoft has one. And they all say very much the same thing, but the one thing holds true, whether you are on-prem, whether you're doing IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, it's always your data, it's your responsibility to protect it. We saw that with Microsoft 365, like, their option was a recycle bin, not good enough, especially when you start to deal with things like retention and compliance, which backup has a role in. And it's the same for Salesforce data and metadata, and platform lock-in as well. If everything is 100% held by one of these platforms, it becomes very difficult to move to another platform should there be a driver behind that, right? And same goes for Salesforce. So just the ability, again, to back up that data, that metadata within Salesforce. And that is coming, I believe, this quarter. It doesn't fall within my remit, so
Okay.
take that with a grain of salt.
We won't hold you to it. Did you just say Microsoft recycle bin? People actually used to want that to be backed up. That was like their storage thing. And they would be upset when they lost their recycle bin due to policy that would delete everything from it.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And that's kind of why we've got Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. And you can back that up to, I don't know, some storage that you have on-prem. If you want to back it up into S3, if you want to back it up into Azure Blob, you can do all that as well. So.
All right, Sam, before we wrap things up, what other new features might you be able to talk about that are coming down the pipe or were just released?
Sure. I think we discussed like what was just really specific to AWS, right? We launched the file level indexing for EFS. We did also introduce support for Amazon Aurora. So all 6 flavors of RDS we do support. Coming down the pipe, trying to think what's not going to get me in trouble. Certainly for Veeam Backup for AWS, which has been the focus of our conversation, we are working on immutability for workloads within AWS. So the immutability that we have right now is if you take a backup of a VM or a physical machine on-prem and you store it in S3. But for those EC2 instances, we don't yet have the immutability support, but that's going to come in the next release. As we look at the entirety of our platform, specifically as it relates to cloud, we will be introducing direct-to-object storage. So instead of taking a backup and storing it on premises on we call it a performance tier on premises, you can just take the backup and install, send it directly to S3. And then controversially to what we were talking about at the beginning is cloud agents as well. So agents that are purpose-built for cloud workloads. So if you have, I don't know, an on-prem workload that you literally have just lifted and shifted to the cloud and isn't necessarily best built to be best protected by snapshots, you want things like application-aware processing. That's kind of where an agent has its time and place. Again, not at any great scale because it's a pain, as we discussed, but we are introducing those agents as well. Again, just to be as prescriptive as possible. How do you want to back it up? Here's an option for that. It's all licensed exactly the same. So I think those are the major things from a cloud perspective that are coming that would be relevant to this convo.
Nice. All right, Sam, now that we're going to wrap it up, anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, I would just firstly say thank you to yourself. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. I'm looking forward to making these a little bit more commonplace and getting on some more calls and diving deeper and deeper into this stuff. If you're interested in getting hands-on, we do have a free edition, as you had mentioned, that allows you to protect up to 10 instances, whether that's EC2, RDS, EFS. We don't care about how big it is. It is just free for you to use. There is unlimited recoveries. It's fully featured, and it actually comes with best effort support as well. So it's not like it's no support, but it's just kind of as and when. So I think the best way is to get hands-on. That's really how I learned the product. And for a guy coming from a marketing background to having an AWS environment his own and being able to protect it, I mean, it's I think it speaks volume not only about the usability and ease of AWS, but the usability and ease of Veeam. So,
well, I'll put a link in the description below that you can actually click on and go directly to your free trial. Give it a try. Sam, thank you so much for joining me. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much. It has been. I mean, this time's just flown by. So
yeah, exactly.
Looking forward to doing more.
Well, listen, we're going to do much more of these. All right, everybody. We talked about Veeam, not only for AWS, but hybrid, multi-cloud. We talked about the cost, security, ease of use, of management, and installation. Sam Nicholls, Director of Public Cloud. Sam, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you again, John, and thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Yep. My name's John Myer. I've been your host, and until next time.